Hey everybody, it's Dan, and it is time for the review of Jason Goes to Hell, the Final Friday. Now, one of the things that you will notice about this film and, the following two is that they do not have the Friday the 13th name in the title, and that is because this was right at the time that New Line ended up obtaining the rights to the character of Jason, but through some sort of strange, legal issue, they did not obtain the Friday the 13th name. They did that later, after the next three films in the series that I'm going to talk about here, but they did not do it just yet. So you will notice that the next three films, none of them have Friday the 13th in the title. So Jason Goes to Hell, the Final Friday. This, in my personal opinion, is one of the much better ones in the series because they took it in a completely different direction. Also, Sean S. Cunningham, who was the creator of the series, came back as in a production capacity for this one. So it's just kind of a nice little thing to have him on as well. But they did a lot to change the character of Jason. And a lot of people weren't happy with that. But personally, I thought it was great. So in this film, it starts off and some random woman is going into Camp Crystal Lake, goes to one of the cabins, starts taking a shower and all that stuff. And of course, once she, is as vulnerable as possible, she starts hearing noises. And that is when Jason shows up, naturally. So Jason is chasing her through this cabin and through the woods, and as she's running, all of a sudden, boom, all of these lights come up, and turn on and kind of disarm Jason. He has no idea what's going on. And there's just tons of FBI agents who just suddenly start blasting him away. I mean, just pieces of him are ripping off left and right, and he goes down, and he is no more. Jason Voorhees is dead. Well, eventually his body ends up getting sent to the morgue, and the coroner, who is investigating, the body, doing the whole autopsy and everything, cracking a couple of jokes about Jason and whatnot, and then inexplicably, and I do think that this is a little odd. It didn't make a whole lot of sense why the coroner would just suddenly do this. I don't know what drove him to do it, and it's not really explained. But he just grabs Jason's heart and just begins chowing down on it, just eating it. And, he's chowing into the thing. And in the next scene, another, like lab tech or whatever walks in and is talking with him, but the guy's not saying anything. And then, he starts making fun of Jason and everything, and the coroner just grabs him, slams him down on the table so hard that his face is actually like getting cut by the the grating on the table, and then slams a probe through the back of his skull. Goes out, and of course Kane Hodder, who also played Jason Voorhees in the previous two films, and the scenes where it actually shows hockey mask Jason in this film, he's playing Jason too. Kane Hodder is one of the FBI agents who's there, standing guard, and he cracks some joke about Jason, and dude turns around, and then the opening credits start up. So the movie picks back up, and both of those guards have been found dead. So has the the guy that he obviously did kill, and also the the guy naturally that the coroner is missing. So we go through the movie and we discover that apparently Jason is actually a demonic being that is capable of moving from body to body. And it's not really explained how that is, possible throughout the movie, but we'll get into a couple of theories on that in just a moment. So Jason moves from body to body, often people along the way, trying to get, I guess, the main part of the story, that his goal is to be able to be resurrected back into the body of Jason Voorhees. And the only way that he can do that is by having basically infecting another member of the Voorhees family, and then, they would become pregnant and give birth to him, I guess, is the thing, which is a little bit strange. And it's very, for the most part, these films have been grounded in some kind of reality. I mean, okay, yes, Jason is a walking corpse, but there hasn't been anything like, metaphysical to any of these movies so far. The Friday the 13th movies, anyway. Obviously, the Nightmare films, yeah, that's all metaphysical stuff, and that's bizarre. But for the Friday the 13th films, they're grounded in at least a semblance of reality, and there's no real major metaphysical stuff until this one. So I just kind of accepted it and bore with it and rode with it. And it's turned out to be a fairly decent story. And ultimately it gets down to the point where we discover that there's a woman in the town who was actually Jason's sister or something like that, or aunt. I'm not really sure. I don't know. But she has a daughter. She gets killed. And then, her daughter is basically like the main heroine throughout the rest of the film. And, Jason's trying to come for her. And of course, they find her mother's body at the old Voorhees mansion, out in the middle of the woods somewhere. I don't really understand. They're living in a mansion. And Jason was like a backwoods hillbilly living in a shack. He couldn't have just gone to the old house. I don't know. Anyway, so big house, and the body of the mother is there. Falls down into the basement somehow during a fight, and they manage to get the entity that was inside of Jason's body out of the the body that it's currently possessing, and it's moving around on the floor and everything. It's this weird worm type thing, and eventually it ends up in the basement, and the girl just says, "Wait a minute, does it have to enter a living relative of the Voorhees family?" And turns out it doesn't, because it hops straight into the mom's corpse downstairs and is resurrected as hockey mask Jason Voorhees. And of course they fight him and everything, and eventually they manage to somehow through the will of heaven he gets pulled down into hell, and everything is good, great, grand, wonderful, the end. And just before the credits roll, some dust kind of moves to the side, and there's Jason's hockey mask just sort of sitting there in the dust. And all of a sudden, Freddy Krueger's claw hand comes up and grabs the mask and pulls it down, and you hear laughter, and then it's over. Which, of course, leads into the next film, Freddy vs. Jason. Now, I personally have a theory about how all of the, weird, mystical stuff came into play with this film. And that is that when Jason's corpse was resurrected in the sixth part, the sixth film in the series, maybe it just wasn't Jason that entire time. Maybe Jason, his soul had ended up in hell, and after that point, when he got resurrected, something rode up there in his place and took over his body. And so from the sixth film on, it's not actually Jason, but rather some sort of demonic entity that is inside of his body. And it has the ability to do this, all this stuff, and that's what happens. But, recently, it has been revealed that the director had another idea in mind, and it comes from the fact that the director used a very specific prop in the film. During the film, the first time someone goes into the Voorhees house, the old abandoned Voorhees house out in the woods, he's looking around and he happens to see a book on the table. The book is in fact, the prop that they used is the exact same prop that they used for the Necronomicon Ex Mortis, the Book of the Dead, from Evil Dead 2. Not the Naturum Demonto from the original one, but the book from the second one that from then on was the Necronomicon. Which actually, speaking of that, I don't understand why they changed the name of the book between films in Evil Dead, but that'll be a film for that'll be a video for another time. Anyway, he finds that and just kind of glances through it a little bit, and yes, you can tell it's got all the same pages and artwork and everything as the book from Evil Dead 2, the Necronomicon Ex Mortis, Book of the Dead. So apparently what the director was trying to get at there was that there was actually some sort of, Kandarian demon worshipping practices within the Voorhees family. And Mrs. Voorhees had the book, and when her son did in fact drown in the before the original movie even started, she used the black magic from the Book of the Dead to bring him back. So he is either just some kind of zombie from maybe a different passage of the Necronomicon, or he is in fact possessed by a deadite. That's, what was being thrown out there. But the thing is, if we incorporate that into it, then that means that we have to incorporate the Army of Darkness and both of the Evil Dead films into this whole mythos too. And number one, I don't want to do that. And number two, even though, the director and creator of the Evil Dead thought that was a pretty clever idea and found some humor in it, I sort of feel like it would be disrespectful to those three actual good films to mash them into, another world that involves all of these films that are just kind of, average or even well below average in a lot of cases. So I don't feel like that. So I'm going to just assume that just happened to be a prop that was just sitting there, and there was no real, connection there, and that my theory is the correct theory for me. Now, if anybody else has any other theories, or if you want to just kind of debate on, what theory you prefer out of those two or whatever, feel free to leave that in the comments section. I'm interested in reading that and seeing what y'all think, and I'll, debate that with you and everything too. Just last thing that I wanted to talk about though, regarding this film. If you purchase this film on Blu-ray, it will not be the definitive version of this film. It will be a seriously chopped version. Now, in the theater, this was actually the first and only Friday the 13th film that I saw in the theater. In the theater, it was the original, uncut version. You saw all of the stuff that I'm about to tell you about. But on Blu-ray, it is not. And the only way that I know of that you can still get the, unrated, uncut anyway, edition of the film is by getting it on DVD, and it's definitely not something you're going to be able to find just in a store. You'll have to go to Amazon or, some other, eBay or something, some sort of collector site to be able to do it. I fortunately lucked out and found a copy for $5 at a half-price books. And it came along with the, the 10th film in the series, which that was great because those two films, I really didn't want to pay too much for at all. But I did watch both versions of the film, despite having the unedited version, just to see what was different. And there's a lot of good stuff that's taken out in the cut version. For example, there's a scene where Jason, in the body of the coroner, goes out, as he's heading back to, the house or whatever. There's a, woman and a guy, doing what women and guys do sometimes in a tent, and he just grabs like a, one of those metal poles that like a stop sign would be on. Just takes it and jabs it right through the tent and right through the woman who's on top of the guy. And in the edited version, the guy just, starts screaming, "Oh!" And you can see it, come out through her, but that's it. That's all you see. In the unedited version, Jason then rips it up through her body, like from here straight up through, her shoulder here, and you see her body just like fall in half while sitting on top of him, and blood starts pouring out on him, and that is when he starts screaming. It wasn't like a whole lot, but it was enough to get, really cool. Now, also in the unedited version, and this is, maybe a little bit of a smaller thing, but I felt it was important to me. The heart, Jason's heart from earlier in the film that was made out of like, gelatin and, things like that. When the coroner eats it in the edited version, he just sort of like, brings it up to his mouth and like starts, but, they cut away and go to different angles and you really can't see it. In the unedited version, you see him bite into that and blood spurting out and dripping down his face and onto his, surgical robes and all that stuff. I mean, it's pretty gory stuff. They took those two things out, yet for some reason they left in the scene where after Jason ends up, grabbing another dude, knocking him out, and, opening up his mouth and, sort of like giving him the, like transferring the essence into the guy. The dude who the essence left ends up in like just an amazing scene of special effects coolness, like just melting slowly too, like and in gory detail. I mean, you see like the skin sloughing off and the muscle underneath, and it was so good. Great special effects. It was fantastic. But after this film, really, it took a while to make the next one, but the next film that was actually made, because they hadn't secured the rights and had they didn't have rights that they needed to secure, but they hadn't really gotten a good, script and everything set up for the Freddy vs. Jason film. So the next film in the series was Jason X. The problem is, chronologically, obviously, well, Jason X is more of a sci-fi horror kind of thing that takes place far in the future on a spaceship and all that stuff. Yeah, it's a really ridiculous idea. But because of that, even though Freddy versus Jason took place, was made, after that film was made, that's going to be our next film in this series, because that's the one that would be, chronologically the next one in the series. So that's all I've got for you for today anyway. Tomorrow's going to be Freddy vs. Jason. Stick around for that. And hey, we are almost done. We've got 5 more days after this of the, Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th garbage. After that, I've got a great idea to do for the next few days, and then I'm going to finish it off with a trilogy that isn't really a trilogy for the last 3 days of October. So stick around for that, and I hope you enjoy it. Anything that you guys want to see after that, make sure you comment and let me know, and I will try to get right on it as soon as I can. All right, take it easy.